Well, hello humans, it's Jaffe. Good to see you. I want to talk about this Square Enix annual report and as it relates specifically to the Avengers game. The Avengers game fascinates me because, sorry about that, it fascinates me because on paper, it seems like the greatest idea in the world. It seems like, of course, you would make a multiplayer Avengers game where you and your friends can get together and you can beat up bad guys, and I'll be Captain America, you be Iron Man, and it's a great developer, and, you know, yeah, it's games as a service, but that doesn't have to be a bad thing, blah, blah, blah. And it's just been one misstep after another. And what's been interesting is this, I'll show it to you. You can get this online if you want. Maybe I'll put the link below, but you can see the Square report online. And what's been really interesting is this fella right here. This is Yosuke Matsuda, who is the president of Square. This is what he said. He came out today and he said, and I'm gonna link you to a better article just because it's, you know, you can read it on your screen. But he literally says that Crystal Dynamics, the developer, who these days is famous more for, you know, rebooting Tomb Raider, making some great Tomb Raider games, they were a wrong fit for this game. Now, I'm interested in this for a bunch of different reasons. The whole article and the whole report is really about Avengers, really fascinating. But first, it's just it's you know, it's neat to hear an executive kind of, you know, move away from the PR talk. And I don't know as much about this when it comes to shareholder reports. I don't know if he is obligated to sort of say what went wrong and why, or if it's good business or whatever. But to actually hear a publisher say that was the wrong developer for this game, that's you know, at least for me, from my experience, that's pretty refreshing. But it's not like we didn't know it. But in that, it's like, okay, it's some validation. It's like, yeah, it seemed pretty fucking weird. Here's what he says. Marvel's Avengers was an ambitious title for us in that we took the games as a service model. It has unfortunately not proven as successful as we would have liked, meaning the game, not the service model yet. Nonetheless, because here he says, taking on games as a service model highlighted issues that we are likely to face in future game development efforts, such as the need to, and here it is, select game designs that mesh with the unique attributes and taste of our studios and development teams. I'm going to read that again because it's so fucking important and interesting. It has highlighted the need for us at Square Enix to select game designs that mesh with the unique attributes and tastes of our studios and development teams, okay? He goes on to say, while the new challenge, I'm going to talk about that in a second, while the new challenge we tackled with this title produced a disappointing outcome, we are certain that the games as a service approach will grow in importance as gaming becomes more service-oriented. How we go about creating new experiences by incorporating this trend into our designs is a key question that we will need to answer going forward. How we go about creating new experiences by incorporating this trend, games as a service, putting them into our designs, that's a key question. Us at Square Enix have got to answer. This is what he says, okay? So there's so much about this. I want to go through some of this with you guys. You know, just as an aside, I do find it interesting that the Avengers has not only disappointed at a individual product level, but it seems that, now this is anecdotal, I don't know this, we saw that Guardians of the Galaxy was number 2 in British box sales. That's all we really know, unless you're in the know. If you work at Square, if you work at Crystal, if you're in retail, maybe you know how, if it's flying off the shelves or bombing. Great fucking game. But I've seen, I probably, again, anecdotally about it, I've seen like 3 or 4 comments on various message boards where people were saying, really, Guardians of the Galaxy is great? Yeah, by the way, it's great. Really is. Love it. They're saying, holy cow, I stayed away from it because it just looked like it was more of the Avengers, which I thought was shit, right? So I wonder how much of this, as they say in politics, is a drag on the ticket. I wonder how much of the bad taste that Avengers has left in a number of people's mouths is actually hurting Guardians of the Galaxy, even though it's a totally different development team and it is a much better game in terms of the whole product. So the service thing, this is fascinating to me because when I was reading this, I was at first going, you know, who is it that likes this stuff. It almost feels like my initial knee jerk was, who is it that likes games as a service? Who wants this? Who is it for? I mean, obviously it's making money, but have we moved beyond the point where the people who make the games genuinely enjoy what they're making? I mean, if you take this guy at his word, and there's no reason you wouldn't, where he literally says, we have to select game designs that mesh with unique attributes and taste of our studios. What he's saying is, Crystal Dynamics didn't want to make this game, or at least not this way. The attributes of Crystal Dynamics, meaning the abilities and the taste of that studio, this was not what they wanted, right? But that said, all these companies, unless you're talking first party for, they don't really need to be service as much right now, although they're all trying to get into it to some extent. But third-party publishers, they're all in, man. These guys, Ubisoft, EA, and now they're talking today. There's all this stuff about fucking the NFT blockchain bullshit. So collectibles that you can. I mean, it's like this money machine, and it's always been about money, but the balance felt a little bit better, right? So my initial thought was, no, this is terrible. This is awful, right? But I saw two things that made me sort of rethink this. One is just a thread. This one's anecdotal. Then I'll give you some figures. One of them is just a thread where this guy's talking about Genshin Impact, which is a games as a service game. If you don't know, I've never played it. I downloaded it tonight. I'm curious. I've heard a lot of people talking about it, obviously. But there's a guy about my age, and he's just like lamenting games as a service, right? He's kind of repeating what a lot of core gamers say. He's like, this is crap. It's bad for gameplay. I miss same couch co-op. I miss LAN parties. Games as a service is ruining gaming. And someone else comes in, and I don't know how old this guy was, and he said, it was really interesting. I was very surprised to see this, but it makes sense. He says, that's just rose-colored glasses of nostalgia, dude. We, meaning many players, dig this shit. There are some great service games out there. This is the first time I have seen someone defend service games sort of in the core community, right? I know that, they're successful as crap, but I was just like, holy cow, right? I want to tell you why that's important, but let me show you this. Look at your screen. This is also came out today. Genshin Impact, Games as a Service, is the highest first-year revenue of all time. They announced today. It's made between 2.3 and 3.5 billion dollars in 1 year. Highest first year. Under that is Fortnite Games as a Service. Under that is GTA 5. GTA 5 is weird because I don't know if they're talking about the online or not, but we know the online is a cash cow. Call of Duty obviously has what is it? Call of Duty the free to play one. War. I don't know how much that figures into this. We've got Monster Strike free, which is service, Candy Crush service, Puzzles service, PUBG service. I don't know what Lineage is. Pokemon Go service. So it is absolutely clear that if you are in the publishing business and you look at this, there's no going back. There is absolutely no going back. And the funny part about this is that I'm amazed by my ignorance. I knew these were very successful, but I was amazed by my ignorance that there's a whole generation of gamers and core gamers that are coming up, and this is normalized to them, right? And so as they get into design, and first being hardcore fans, being message boards, then learning how to code and design and art and all that, and they go into the business, this is going to be what's normal to them, and this is going to make sense to them, and this is what they love, and this is going to push their nostalgia buttons, and this is going to excite them, because this is sort of how they engage with gaming. I'm not saying all of them. There will always be those purists, like hopefully I'll always stay a purist when it comes to, even if it's a terrible looking low budget indie game, if it's self-contained and really good, that's always my preference, right? But this is interesting. And then I started thinking, this never left my brain. I was 22, 23. I had just gone up to Foster City from Santa Monica to work, for Sony, when PlayStation became part of, when Sony ImageSoft became part of PlayStation. And Next Gen Magazine did an interview with Steve Race. And Steve Race was the PlayStation head of development at the time. He was there for the launch and all that. I want to say Race is the guy who did the whole $2.99, and that was his whole press conference, and walked off the stage, pretty much put the final knife in the back of Sega Saturn. But anyway, In this interview with Next Gen, I'll never forget this quote, or I'll never forget the quote. The quote was, making video games is a young man's game. Now, again, times were different. Now it would obviously be men or women or whatever. But the gist is the royal man, the royal we, whatever. Making games is a young man's game. And I'm being 22, 23, 24. I'm like, fuck yeah, I have my whole career in front of me. This is awesome. And what I thought he meant, and I never spoke with the guy. I don't know what he meant, but what I took that as meaning at the time was the sacrifice and energy that you need to make video games, because it is so hard and it takes so long. That's a young person's game. When you get into your mid-30s and 40s and onward, you have family, you have other commitments, you have responsibilities that are not just to your job. You can't be there every night, blah, blah, blah. And I guess he meant that to an extent. But this has been real interesting to me, because I think what he also may have meant is the window. I have had a front row seat to watch as my childhood love of video games was able to spill over into my work of video games. And I had a window there from about 1995 to about 2004, about a 10-year window. And in that window, it's not to say I could do no wrong, but I was plugged in. I was young enough to know what the gamer community wanted, but I was old enough to be in a position that I could command creative authority on these projects. And in doing so, I could serve up these video games that that were the core audience were like, I like that. I get that. We're in sync, right? And I saw myself, I mean, you just look at my career after God of War, I saw myself shift away from that. And it wasn't like I was working any less, or it wasn't working any less hard. Is that less hard? I wasn't working less. God damn, I was working hard just the same. But I was kind of, distancing from that core AAA audience. I didn't want the same things that they did anymore, okay? And I knew that. It's not a surprise. But now this is fascinating to me. So now you've got these developers like Crystal Dynamics, which is, I wouldn't say they're a premier developer at the level of Naughty Dog, at the level of Santa Monica. Someone just subscribed. Thank you for that. I don't know who you are. I made it a little too big. But they're very close. They're like, if Santa Monica and Naughty Dog are A+, Crystal Dynamics is A-, B+. They're really, really good. And they probably could be A+ if they had a first-party wallet and ability to slip schedules and all that shit. So I wonder about that, though. I wonder if those guys and girls who have done Tomb Raider, and I forget what they did before that, but I mean, Crystal's been in it forever, but this configuration of Crystal, where they're really good at the big budget third-person character games, and now they're going to work with Initiative on the Perfect Dark game. But I wonder if they're going, when you hear this president of Square Enix literally say it wasn't a good fit. I wonder how much of it was just like, yeah, that was just them. They weren't a good fit. Wasn't right. But there's a million, or how much of it is that generation of gamers, just like what happened to me and certain colleagues, they're also sort of slow. You're starting to see the beginning of them getting kind of pushed away and out of the ability to really connect and communicate with what the zeitgeist wants, because all you have to do is look at your screen and see the money you're looking at here. And if you've come up and you were inspired by the games I made and my colleagues made, and then you got to make games and you've been doing that for a while, well, these kids coming up were inspired by your games, but in this business model. So I don't know. Just maybe the path is all old game designers and developers go indie. I have no clue in terms of designers and directors. I mean, programmers and artists, they can keep going up and up and up. But at the design level, you either have to like this shit or you're going to be miserable working the job, right? So maybe making games is not a young man's game, but AAA designing and directing may very well be. The other thing is he talks about the attributes, right? The president, I'm bad with his name. It's going to take me a while to remember his name. Yasuki Matsuda. Remember, he says, we need to pair select game designs that mesh with unique, we talked about taste, but attributes and abilities, right? This is interesting to me. It reminds me of I was at dinner with Scott Rhodey and Shuhei Yoshida many years ago. This was like 2012, 13, and no, maybe it was before that. It was like 2010, something like that. And they're like, I think Shannon had called me and said, "Oh, you should go to dinner with these guys. They want to talk about what you might want to do next, blah blah blah." And I remember talking to them about this shooter I wanted to make, which eventually became Drawn to Death. But I remember just talking to them at dinner, and you know, the way Drawn to Death was greenlit had nothing to do with that dinner, but that was the first time we kind of brought up that I want to work on a shooter. And Rhodey says, or not even shoot. One of them says, it's like, yeah, but you've never made a shooter before. And I'm like, yeah, so what? And I think it was Rhodey that's like, those things are very specific and very particular, and how they get made and all this stuff. And I was coming at it. You have to understand, this is also a design generational thing. I was coming at it from, my first game was a cartoon platformer. My second game was Car Combat, which was, I guess, a shooter racer. My third game, other than failed games that didn't ship, was a racer, and then I helped with Kinetica. And then my next game was a action adventure 3D character based game. So I was all over. And if you look at some of the teams I worked with, like Single Track, I mean, those guys, I mean, holy cow, right? Single Track was like Jet Moto and Warhawk and Twisted Metal and Streak and Critical Depth and you know, on and on and on, and nothing, you know, ever, you know, they had a PC game called Outlanders or something that was like a third-person shooter. Nothing ever fit the mold. But back then it didn't have to. You didn't have to specialize as a development team. And now, and I think it's been going this way, this is what Scott was talking about at dinner. Now it's like, yeah, man, you know, these things are so specific, and the audience demand is so high for what is acceptable in that genre that you can't just bounce around anymore for the most part like you used to do. You have to really lock in as a team and go, that's what we do well. And again, the president of Square, Matsuda, is basically saying that. He's like, the abilities of this team, it wasn't right for sort of what they do, and what they're good at. I will say that I saw this, and I saw some people over on, I think it was NeoGAF, going, oh, this guy, this Matsuda guy is throwing these guys under the bus, the Crystal guys. And about 4 or 5 people commented like that, and I'm like, I don't think that's what he's doing at all. I think he's simply being honest. They're clearly a great developer. He even says as much in the report. But I don't think you're throwing someone under. I mean, if anything, he's throwing himself under the bus, going, we have to learn how to better match our talent with these designs, right? So I didn't really see it that way. I am curious though, as these teams, I mean, it may have already happened, right? But at a creative level, again, it goes back to the artists and programmers. They can kind of work on anything if they're engaged and interested. It doesn't really matter. But at a designer level, I wonder, as these teams also start to specialize, I would have not enjoyed my career as much as I did if every game would have had to been the exact same genre, maybe with a little bit of a tweak. I would have been like, this is fucking boring. I've done this 6 times already. So I don't know how that's going to affect designers and developers as they start to, you know, more and more demanding specialization of these. And that, I have to say one more thing on this, because like I said, this little article right here was just packed with nutrition. There's so much about what this article is about that just fascinated me. So what I thought was interesting in this particular article, which covers the Square report, this is from Video Games Chronicle. They talk about Marvel's Avengers and why it hasn't caught on. I want to read you this real quick. He says, Tom Ivan wrote it. He says, Marvel's Avengers performance suffered partially due to technical problems present at launch. In addition to these issues, a lack of post-launch content, including delays to planned expansions and next-gen versions of the game, contributed to a dwindling player count. Now, as of yesterday, I think it was back on Steam, back to under 1,000. It was like 800 yesterday. So yeah, it's true. But that's not the main reason this game flopped. The technical issues can get ironed out. The delays, you know, it's delayed, then it's great, nobody cares. I'm sure those things didn't help, okay? But it really is avoiding the key aspect, and this will tie into what the president of Square was saying, and that it's the wrong team for this, right? The key aspect was the core loop of this game simply wasn't good. The combat felt great. It was so much fun to play the Hulk. The production value was great. The voice acting was great. It was a wonderfully produced piece of gameplay. And even the opening 2 hours was pretty fucking good. Starting on the Golden Gate Bridge, and then you're Kamala Khan, and then you're Bruce Banner, you're the Hulk, and you're going through the woods, and you get to the desert, you get to the base. All of that felt like what you wanted Avengers to be. And somewhere when those characters get inside the fortress or the base, the AIM base, which is Kamala, Miss Marvel goes in with Hulk, it just pancakes into literally just room after room after room of robots and grinding. And it's almost like the guys who wanted to make the story game, they gave them a couple of hours, and everything after it, it's like, look, guys, it can't be that. We don't have the time and or budget to make Uncharted with the Avengers, which is what I think most people wanted. Instead, you know, you can give us a little bit at the beginning, but no, we have to build modularly, and this is a game about grinding, right? In the multiplayer, which is the heart and soul of what this is. And it's interesting because there are companies that know how to do that well. I mean, even you know, it's just fascinating, the specialization aspect, because it's not just specializing in the microtransactions and in the games as a service, but you have to figure out what core gameplay loop merges best with games as a service, right? I don't know. I've never made a games as, well, I guess Drawn to Death was trying to be, but we didn't survive long enough to be a service to anybody. But you know, I don't know how accurate this is because I've never done it, but I would imagine melee combat games as a service is a much more difficult thing to create a compelling loop. Now, I know there are games that do it. Genshin Impact does it. There's definitely some compelling addictive combat. But you are removing some key gameplay elements, that make it more interesting. Even if you look at Genshin Impact, it's like, 3 or 4 enemies on you at most. If you look at Marvel's Avengers, in order to kind of sell the superhero fantasy, you've got 6 other people fighting by your side, or 4, or whatever it is. There's a lot of fodder enemies, right? So the pace is fast. Genshin, it's more measured. You're blocking and you're dodging, and it's you can pay attention and you can read the telegraphs of the enemy attacks coming in, and how it engages the brain more. Or if you're doing a shooter, you can use distance, different weapons that have different ranges. You can aim for different parts in the body. You can aim for different enemy types, like the typical, this guy has a gas tank on his back. Aim for that, whatever. When you're in the middle of combat with that many enemies, I'm not saying it's not possible, but it becomes very hard for it to be anything but just, pound, do some flashing moves, pound. I've leveled up, I've got my super boom, that looks great, pound, do it again, hey, level 2, I unlock some bullshit. So the core loop of this game, which is the combat, really was not designed, or if it was, it wasn't seemingly designed to merge with the meta that they had, or the games as a service aspect that they had, because it simply wasn't compelling enough at a moment to moment. I mean, I get so fascinated, because if you strip away the thematic of the Avengers and you literally just look at it, abstractly, you're going, how do I create a compelling games as a service monetization desire to grind, while at the same time putting these characters who fight really fast, and they fight lots of enemies at one time, and 90% of the combat is close and melee. How do those things live together well? And it's almost like it was just such a gear grinding mismatch that it didn't work. And then when you throw in the user interface, which again, I mean, it's funny. I'm not going to tell you who it was, but I talked to somebody very, very, very high up on the God of War team, the new God of War. And they were like, well, what did you think? And I said, I loved it. One of my favorite games of the last couple of years. Great fucking game, as I'm sure you know. I'm sure you agree. I said my biggest fault with it was the UI. It was kind of confusing. It was kind of all over the place, the map and the leveling up. And they said, it was the last thing we were able to tackle, and we just didn't have the time to give it the kind of polish we gave everything else. Well, in a game like God of War, it's kind of a pain in the ass, but the game takes you by the hand and says, hey, I'm going to show you a good time regardless. But when you're dependent on that game loop to the meta loop to pull you out of the moment to moment, so you're like, oh shit, I'm X points away from leveling up, or I have to put this currency into this weapon in order to get the second level of it or the third level of it. It's not that it has to be visually simplified, but it's got to be as grokkable, as some folks say. It's got to be. You have to understand it at a fundamental level so the hooks get in you. So now you've got a team that doesn't want to make this kind of game, clearly, according to the president. You've got a team that has a core gameplay loop that's not merging with the monetization loop. It's just a recipe for what it is, which is kind of, I guess it's a failure. I mean, at this point, I don't know. So, I don't know what's next, right? So I don't know how big Crystal is. I'm sure they're huge, but I don't know if it's a 2-team studio. So you've got a lot of, and if it is, who's doing Tomb Raider? There has to be more than one team at Crystal. But they did release today some new Avengers roadmap stuff. Oh, I want to show you this. This is the same story, talking about the money. Genshin Impact made 3.7 billion this year. They just decided to compare it to top earning gambling companies. It's almost right in the middle. It makes more than Las Vegas Sands, Caesars. I think this is Scientific Games, like online gambling. I mean, that's how much money these fucking things make. I mean, yeah. So this is welcome to your new normal. At least for a lot of games that aren't indie games. But I do wonder, are we after they released the thing today, which was talking about like Spider-Man's coming, and I think there's Marvel Cinematic Universe costumes and some ongoing things. Then when Hawkeye comes out on MCU this month or next month, there's some content for that. They didn't go much beyond that. And I wonder, are they going to just keep trying to make this thing work? Or are they not saying it to the investors, but they're, if Spider-Man comes out and it doesn't totally rule the roost, or these changes that they just put in recently don't change anything, a year from now, it'll probably still be going, but there'll be no new content and there'll be a skeleton crew keeping it alive. So I don't know what to read of it. I do think it's fundamentally good, because it allows that team that really never wanted to make the damn thing to begin with to move on to pastures that they like, whether it's within Crystal Dynamics. It does kind of give a little bit more faith in the rumor that Microsoft might be buying Crystal, because given that first parties are the only ones for the most part, unless you're talking indie, that can do single player narrative story-based games without bastardizing them into a service-based game, Microsoft has said they need those. And I mean, seriously, if you get the Tomb Raider team and you say, here's a lot more money, here's a lot more freedom to slip your schedule than you got when you were a third party and you had to, all that shit, that's a hell of a get, man. That's a hell of a fucking get. And especially if the president of who owns them now is saying this team doesn't really vibe with where we're going as a company. Maybe they'll sell them. I think that could actually be great for everyone. Square can use that money to get another team that loves this shit. Crystal gets to go make the kind of games they're great at, even on a bigger stage because of the funding. And Microsoft gets an Uncharted killer maybe. So that would be cool. Tie it in with a Tomb Raider exclusive. It's like, we'll part of our deal with you guys to buy this team is we also want Tomb Raider exclusively for the next 10 years. All on Xbox. Think about that. Anyway, fellas, like I said, some days when I do this stream or I do these videos, there literally is like 12 articles. There's so much happening. Today, one little article, it sent my mind reeling. I don't know why, but I think because in this, like I said, it's nutrient packed. It's reflective of so many interesting things to me that are happening in the business, in design, in monetization, and it's all there in one story. You don't get that every day, folks. I hope you're well. Horizon is out tonight. I'm going to be playing that, I think, streaming. But if I don't see you tonight, I'll see you soon. Stay safe. Bye, y'all.